I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily Week in Review. Canadians who pay the federal carbon price got a midsummer money drop on Friday. This is the first half of their annual climate action incentive payment deposited into their bank accounts. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau promoted the payments as a way to bring Canadians along in the fight against climate change without causing them financial hardship. People who filed their 2021 tax returns in Ontario, Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan received the deposits on Friday. This to cover half the amount they can expect to receive for the 2022 to 2023 fiscal year. The rest will come in quarterly payments in mid-September and mid-January. However, one organization claims that federal carbon pricing costs more than it returns. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation says that a recent report by the Parliamentary Budget Officer says Ontario families will, on average, pay about $360 extra in carbon pricing in 2022, even with the rebates. Well, with us now to discuss this is Mr. Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Mr. Terrazzano, great to have you back, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So can you tell us a little bit more about this research into federal carbon pricing and how much it will actually cost Canadians?
Unfortunately, the Trudeau government hasn't been exactly honest with Canadians about the true cost of the carbon tax. The Trudeau government claims that families will be better off with its carbon tax and rebate, but the Parliamentary Budget Officer's numbers show that the government is using magic math. That's because this year, the carbon tax will cost the average household anywhere between $300 all the way up to $670, depending on which province you live in, even after accounting for the rebates. So it turns out, which we've been talking about, is that the carbon tax is an unnecessary and very painful cost for many Canadians who are already struggling with the rising cost of living.
And what's interesting is that not all Canadians fall under the federal carbon pricing system. So can you unpack that for our viewers?
Yeah, that's correct. So what we're talking about, the direct federal carbon tax, is for taxpayers in provinces like Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. But the other taxpayers in other provinces are not coming out of here scot-free. And that's because the Trudeau government is forcing the other provinces to impose a carbon tax of their own. Now, if we're looking at a place like Montreal, for example, when you include all of the taxes, every time you fill up your car in Montreal, you're paying 6 different types of taxes. The same thing applies in a place like Vancouver. 6 different taxes every time you fuel up, where the total tax bill makes up 75 cents per liter of gas.
Now, taking a look at your numbers here, we know the CTF used a PBO report to find these numbers. But were there any additional findings in this report that we should know about?
Yeah, there are. And here's the key additional finding is that unfortunately, the big tax bill is only getting worse. And that's because Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says that he'll continue to crank up his carbon tax to nearly 40 cents per liter of gas by 2030. So if you look at from now all the way to 2030, the carbon tax will cost the average household between $6,400 all the way up to $13,000, depending on what province you live in, even after accounting for the rebates.
So what do we know so far about where these additional funds are being allocated to address the issue of climate change?
Well, the Trudeau government is essentially saying that most of the rebates are just going to be going back to households. Again, it makes the claim that most families will be better off because they'll get more rebates than carbon taxes. But again, the government's own independent budget watchdog shows that that is magic math. And the numbers put out by the Parliamentary Budget Officer make it clear that the average household will, in fact, pay hundreds of dollars more in the carbon tax than what they'll get back in rebates.
All right, sir, about a minute left here. So let's talk solutions. What kind of steps is the CTF advising the government to take to not only address climate change, but not hurt Canadians' wallets?
The first thing that we have to remember is that a carbon tax is not a low-cost environmental plan. The carbon tax is a high-cost tax plan. I mean, BC has had the highest carbon tax in Canada for years, but emissions continue to go up. Emissions under the first year of the Trudeau government's national carbon tax also went up. So what we're calling on the federal government to follow the lead of many other countries. President Joe Biden's pushing for gas tax relief. The European Parliament's largest political party pushing for gas tax relief. The Netherlands, Germany, South Korea, India, Italy, Ireland, states states like New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Florida, they've all announced gas tax relief. So we're calling on the feds to cut the carbon tax, cut the GST, cut the federal gas tax, and provide Canadians with much needed relief at the pumps.
All right, Mr. Terrazzano, always great having you on Forum Daily. Thank you again for your time today. Up next, a conversation on energy security in Europe with Dr. Heather Exner-Pirot. Stay with us. Germany's biggest importer of Russian gas, Uniper, said on Monday that Gazprom sent it a letter which claims force majeure, events beyond its control, as the reason for past and current shortfalls in gas deliveries. The company had previously reduced gas deliveries through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline to Germany by up to 60% last month. The Russian majority state-owned company claimed technical issues, but German politicians say the decision was made by the Kremlin to push up energy prices. In Canada, the government has faced a backlash for its decision to send a repaired turbine for the Russian Nord Stream 1 pipeline back to Germany. Critics say the move will help support Russia's economy during the war in Ukraine. Well, with us now to discuss the issue of energy security is Dr. Heather Exner-Pirot. She is a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute and a global fellow at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars in Washington, D.C. Ma'am, welcome back to Forum Daily.
For having me.
So let's start with an overview of the turbine delivery for viewers who may not be familiar with the situation.
Yeah, these are essential in the functioning of Nord Stream, the pipeline that carries gas from Russia to Europe to Germany. And it was undergoing regular maintenance. There was suspicions that Russia would use it as an excuse to cut off. Obviously, they're weaponizing their energy sources to Europe and use it as an excuse. It was important to Germany that we return this turbine after it was repaired in Canada so that they don't have that excuse, which Canada did, suffering the backlash because it did violate our own sanctions. And now Russia's declared force majeure, so they found other excuses to cut off gas to Germany.
So what sort of reasons did the federal government give for sending parts back to Germany?
This is a difficult decision. This is not a black and white decision in that Germany needs gas, just like we all do. Germany needs energy and is very dependent on Russia. And how they got themselves into this situation, we can have a discussion on that. But in the short term, Germany, German economy, the European Union needs that gas. And so they need that Nord Stream 1 to be functioning properly. And they need Russia to be sending them that gas. So Germany asked Canada, I think, politically, this is a difficult move for Canada, but Germany needs it. They asked Canada, they're one of our best allies. The United States has supported it. Obviously, Russia or Ukraine is furious, though, because we are violating the sanctions. Russia is violating international law, is committing war crimes against Ukraine. And here we are facilitating their energy exports. So it's a very difficult decision. It's not black and white. I don't think it's a simple choice that the government had in front of it. And I can see both sides of the issue. But regardless, those turbines did not stop Russia from weaponizing their energy against Europe.
All right, Ms. Exner-Pirot, now, what do we know so far about the scale of oil and gas export profits for the Russian government, considering this war in Ukraine and the sanctions against this country?
Well, the important thing is that oil prices are up very high. Now gas prices are up very high, double, triple, quadruple what they were, say, 18 months ago. And so Russia, like Alberta, like Canada, is seeing a windfall. And this, of course, is enabling it to fund its war, last longer and kind of a war of attrition that's coming up. So Russia's benefiting in every kind of way right now. But in the medium term, in the next few months, those sanctions will start to bite. Right now, they haven't had the effect that we want to see. But in the next couple of months, when they do have more restrictions on what they can import, when they have their own maintenance to do, then there will be some pain for Russia coming up soon. But right now, they're still raking in the oil money.
All right, and bringing this back home to Canada, how can our country aid our European allies regarding their energy supply?
So the turbine issue is a short-term immediate issue. And the bigger question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we get into this situation where we were so dependent on Russia, where we didn't have any options, and what could Canada have done differently, and what can we do differently now? And so the number one answer is to get more of our product. We are rich in oil and gas reserves, to get that product to Germany, to get it to Europe, so that they can get off of Russian oil and gas, and so that they can still have a functioning economy, functioning industry, and be able to heat their homes at a reasonable, affordable price. So the answer is obvious is that we need to get off of Russian oil and gas. We cannot transition, into totally renewable energy in this short time frame. And so Canadian oil and gas has to fill some of that void. And I'm hoping Ottawa starts to see it that way. We've maybe heard some whispers that they're thinking that way, but no concrete action yet.
All right, a quick 30 seconds left here, but do you think these steps would also enhance Canada's own energy security?
If we started exporting, yes, we have a tremendous, see how Russia is using their oil and gas to advance their political ends. And they have political values and ends that are not the same as ours. But we have that same amount of oil and gas. We could be using our energy to advance our own values and our own interests and being a force for good in the world. Instead, we've left everyone vulnerable, to these dictatorships and authoritarian regimes. And we're all reaping kind of the repercussions of that now.
Dr. Exner-Pirot, thank you again for an informative interview.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back. An internet security company's research into the popular social media app TikTok finds the application can collect far more information than you think on your phones. Internet 2.0 indicates the app may have access to anything from your SIM number and hard drive to the accounts on your device. What's more is that over a third of the IP addresses linked to TikTok were found to have links to mainland China. Well, joining us now to tell us more about this analysis of TikTok is Dr. Michael Lambrow, Managing Director at Internet 2.0 USA. Dr. Lambrow, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with a brief overview of this analysis into TikTok by Internet 2.0.
Yeah, sure. So our analysts, they do cybersecurity. They reverse engineer applications. They do all sorts of security related research. And we took a look at the TikTok app because of the recent, the flourish of news related to the TikTok application. And we were able to show that we've done previous research on this app, but we've been able to show that TikTok application is not only collecting data on your device, but it's also collecting data. That is, so what from the average user in the, United States or Canada and Australia, but also they've been telling regulatory agencies that this data is not accessible from mainland China, which we've proven that it is able to be accessed by mainland China and is being accessed by mainland China. So they're collecting all the information, your location, the calendar, external storage, what Wi-Fi you're connecting to, your MAC address. And so all of this data is being harvested by the TikTok app, and it is quite concerning from from a US standpoint and from an Australian standpoint, and I'm sure from a Canadian standpoint as well.
Definitely some concerning information, Doctor. Now, so does TikTok inform its users of such privacy access, maybe through cookies acceptance or disclaimers?
Yes, they oftentimes, and in the case of TikTok, they will relentlessly ask for user access. And as we know, users do not actually read these terms of services. Most often, they just sort of click the yes to use the app. But in the case of Facebook or Twitter or other applications, LinkedIn, this is not as concerning as if it's coming from a state that is actually adversarial towards Australia, the US, or Canada. And this data is being harvested and used by a totalitarian state in China. And so this is what is most concerning. It's not that this data, for the most part, these applications like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, they're answerable to democratic institutions. So we can take these cases to regulatory agencies within democratic institutions. The problem here is it's offshore, it's in China, and it's able to be accessed by the Chinese government.
And what's interesting is that over a third of the IP addresses linked to TikTok were connected to mainland China. So what exactly does this mean in terms of the scale and magnitude of this access?
Well, it just means, and I think they've gone ahead and they're quite concerned about it from a PR standpoint. They've fired their head of security. They're in full backpedaling mode. They're trying to, block the information as it comes out or dismiss it as it comes out. But for the most part, everything they've said up front is that the data is hosted in the US for US users, and it's not accessible by mainland China. And this, our research and other research has shown that it is accessible. So this is not only a violation of law, but it's actually they're doing a large part to deceive regulatory agencies in this sense.
And are there any differences between Mac OS and iOS devices in terms of this security and access?
Well, from our research, we've done both for the Mac OS, or not for the Mac OS, but for the the iPhone and for Android systems, and it's the same. Yeah, correct.
And why would the Chinese government be interested in such information in the first place?
Well, this is collecting of the information, hosting the information, storing the information somewhere is it's problematic because that information can always be sourced if needed. So if they're interested in a certain person or individual or a network of folks, they can go ahead and look into that later on in the future. But from also a democratic standpoint, applications like TikTok are easily manipulated by the folks behind the scenes, let's say in mainland China, who can easily amplify. They can pick divisive narratives within your culture or society, and they can push them. So this can lead to election interference. This can lead to all sorts of troublesome, what would you say, misbehavior within the social media ecosystem.
All right, Dr. Lambra, we've got a quick 20 seconds left here, but where can our viewers go to learn more about your research into this?
They can go to internet 2-0.com. You can download the app, or you can download our white papers and this white paper from the website. You can also visit us on LinkedIn or Facebook. We also have pages there. So thank you very much for your time.
Stay with us. Up next, we'll have a look at a new report that looks at hospital wait times. A new report released today by a nonprofit think tank claims to have found a potential solution to Canada's healthcare waiting list crisis. SecondStreet.org points to a healthcare policy in Europe that allows patients to travel to other EU countries for surgery and be reimbursed by their home country. The reimbursements would be of the same amount that the home country would have paid for local treatment. Well, joining us now to tell us more about this healthcare policy and if it's realistic for Canada to implement is Colin Craig, president of SecondStreet.org. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Well, thanks for having me, Nima.
So we know that Canadian provinces already reimburse patients for a portion of their planned medical costs abroad. So tell us a little bit more about this system and how successful it is.
So you're right. It does happen in Canada, but it appears to be a very, very limited number of people that actually get approved. It seems to be a very rare situation when someone actually is approved for this. Whereas in Europe, it's the opposite. It's standard for patients to be able to go to another EU country, pay for surgery, go back to their home country, and then get reimbursed for what that home country would normally pay. So last year, it was about 84% approval of applications for reimbursement in Europe, whereas in Canada, one lawyer from Ontario estimated that it was about 98% rejected in Ontario. So it's the opposite in Canada, and we think that if it was made a more standard procedure, it could help thousands of patients across the country get the care they need instead of languishing on long waiting lists.
Sounds like some significant differences between both systems, Mr. Craig. So what is the current state of Canada's healthcare waiting list system right now?
Well, we're in a crisis, and we were in a crisis before COVID came along. We've been obtaining government data showing thousands of patients each year die before they even get a chance for surgery. These are patients that could have had their quality of life improved if they had had hip surgery, cataract surgery, knee operations, those types of things. But even some cases where patients died while waiting for procedures which could have potentially saved their lives. So things like heart operations. So we're in a very, very tough spot right now. That's why we think it's time to look at outside the box solutions.
And what kind of steps can our officials take to implement a similar system like the one that's seen in the EU? And would you say that it's an easy system to implement, Mr. Craig?
Well, it would be very easy to implement once a patient has a approval from the system that they need a particular type of surgery, whether it's a hip or knee operation. That part already happens. So once patients get to that stage, they could then decide to go abroad, get a surgery done at a facility that's qualified, of course, and then go back home and get reimbursement. And it's not just the patients that go abroad that would benefit. Every time a patient does that, those that are behind them in the waiting list get to move up a spot because now the government doesn't have to provide it using the public's system. So patients, whether you're traveling abroad or staying for the government, both sets would benefit from this type of proposal if it moved forward.
And I want to go back to your recent release on this. In it, you say that governments could also reimburse just a portion of these medical costs in this system. But how would that affect patients in terms of affordability?
Well, yeah, that's certainly an option. I mean, Europe does it one way. It doesn't mean we have to do it exactly the same way. So governments could approve a portion. And even then, that would still benefit patients because some patients right now are traveling abroad for healthcare. They pay for it privately, and that's it. They don't get any money from the government. Some look at that as an option, and then they decide, it's just a bit too pricey. Well, if the government even subsidized a portion of it, then certainly even more patients would decide, okay, I'm going to go for it. I'll pay for a chunk of it myself, and the government can pay for the other portion. So, either way, no matter how governments do this, I think that you would see less stress on long public sector waiting lists for surgery. And like I say, that would also benefit patients that don't decide to go abroad either, because they would then get to move ahead in the line.
All right, Mr. Craig, just about a minute left here, but how many patients' lives could be saved or improved by this new system, and who would qualify?
That's hard to say because it depends on the take up and how governments structure it. But I think it's very easy to say we'd be talking about thousands and thousands of patients, because right now about a couple 100,000 patients at least every year voluntarily decide to go to other countries specifically for healthcare. So if there was some kind of financial support from the government on top, I think it's fair to say that number would increase.
All right, Mr. Craig, always great having you on Forum Daily. Thank you again for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at important conversations from this past week on Forum Daily Week in Review. Join us for news during the week, and be sure to follow us on social media.